What's going on, workforce? Brian and Chris here, and today we're actually talking about the reception of Dragonflight. Chris has been deep diving into all the information, and I'm really curious about his perception of this latest WoW expansion. What does this mean for the future of the games like Final Fantasy XIV and Guildwars and other MMORPGs that we like to play? And so, Chris, I want to kind of give you obviously the first crack at this. Dragonflight, what was your initial take for the announcement? Because I saw you on stream. You typically weren't like the most cheerful self about the expansion. And where are you today in lieu of all this like media blitz? Why don't you break it down for me?
So the announcement, watching the whole announcement video, was super vague. Now, historically, my experience with these has been at BlizzCon, right? So you're there, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you're on site either, or you're watching it digitally, and it's this whole immersive experience. And there's, fireworks going off about something Diablo that'll never actually release. And there's a StarCraft 2 world tournament for people that are way better than I can comprehend. And there's a Hearthstone area with a big tavern, and there's just all of this stuff. So it's so much that you almost get deprived of senses. And if you go there, you go downstairs and you're playing arcade games that are old games that you're like, God, I forgot Blizzard released these. And it's just this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all exciting. And so at the beginning, there's a keynote, and the keynote is super vague, and there's a WoW expansion. We don't have a date. We don't know what's in it. It's probably going to have zones and things to kill and ways to level and improve your character, which are all just vague.
Yeah.
And then you just move on. But then there's this whole weekend of stages and details of here's our mentality, and here's some of the voice actors that have worked in the past, and what we think about lore moving forward, and why we like PvP, and different panels. And some of those are well done and some are not, but it's all part of this whole blitz of information.
Yeah.
Now, for Final Fantasy XIV fans, we get this through dedicated MMO conventions for only 14, not the rest of Square Enix's properties. And it's split over 3 separate FanFest, historically speaking. And those are loaded with information. And of course, the second and the third one catch you up in case you're just now tuning in, but then also dump a little bit more. And so the first one tends to be pretty vague. It's like, here's some title art. It's going to have
stuff,
abilities. And so it's really vague. But as we hone in over that kind of year-long hype cycle, by the time we're into the expansion, we actually know a great deal, even though at the beginning it started out very vague. And then people that have been watching in the game and the news for a long time can look into that vagueness and say, it looks like, and you can fill in a lot of the blanks, but those are guesses. And so we're looking for what are the exceptions to the rule? This was that opening keynote.
Mm-hmm.
But then initially, it wasn't clear to me as an outsider, which I think to anybody that's taken a break from the game or they're just getting into the game or anything like that, you're just kind of like, that's it? And they showed off some features, but those features were Dragonflight itself, the actual dragons flying.
Yeah.
Which I tweeted out, somebody who put together clips of Guild Wars gameplay, followed by WoW gameplay, followed by Guild Wars gameplay, followed by WoW gameplay. And you're like, oh, so they just imported that, just straight up, just picked it up and said,
there you go.
Yeah, that's cool.
We're going to do that now.
We like that. And we don't even need our own version. WoW has not invented a lot of wheels over the years. They picked up things that are popular within the MMORPG space, and they've made it their own with varying success. And that's how they've gotten where they are. Blizzard as a whole doesn't invent genres. They take existing genres and they bring their own space to it, much like Apple. They don't invent something. They just go out and they say, I don't think that's being done as well as it could be. Let's take our own take at it. But this just looked like a carbon copy. And so when they say things like high quality items on crafting, but don't give a lot of context, Final Fantasy fans go, what? How can you do that? We already have that. So overall, I was really disappointed with the initial announcement.
Okay.
Since then, I have gone and been reading all the community posts and the various interviews they've given. And it feels a lot more like the way Guild Wars been built up to their expansion recently, where it is and you're going to hear from me again, this point, and this point, and this point. And so I do think that it would be best if, maybe somewhere in the announcement that was better communicated. It felt like the first half of the announcement was we listened. And then the second half was like, here's a bunch of features, but you don't have any context. So it felt like if you just swap those features out for various other features, that whole announcement as a whole could have been any other WoW expansion. We listened. Here's the features, and then it announces.
Mm-hmm.
And so, considering not every other WoW expansion has been received well, the words don't feel good. Like they've lost that trust. So telling me it's going to be awesome, I don't believe you.
So one of the things that I've picked on this week, especially with the announcement, because I saw like the tweet that you made, I've seen other people make references to like, hey, they're copying this other game or that other game, and like honestly, like I've already seen that also in WoW's past, where they're like, oh, it's copying Lord of the Rings, it's doing this and this and this verbatim, and it's, you know, like it's copying or it's an homage or it's, you know, like at the end of the day, like, I mean, everybody copies. Like Yoshi B's like, we had to take the WoW model and make that Final Fantasy 14.
Is a game type across multiple games, and people equate it with the one they've played the most, Overwatch, Splatoon,
yeah,
whatever.
Overwatch,
But
I
like,
think is that
But he referenced Splatoon when he asked what inspired it, and it is Splatoon.
Mm-hmm. So I don't actually like fault that at all. Like honestly, because it's like we've long, especially when it comes to Guildwars. I think Guildwars, like when you sit here and put it on a pedestal, if you're going to tier list mount systems in games, like I think Guild Wars 2 takes the list when it comes to like how mounts feel and interact with the world, and when you're riding them and the kind of the momentum, and like ultimately, like if you're going to put mounts in a game, like that's the model that you want to look at for what it does so well. In my opinion, they have less mounts because of it, so you could say, well, clearly I want more mounts, so you'd go play a game like 14 that's got a massive amount of mounts that you can go chase and try and collect, etc. But I don't really worry about that. What I was interested in hearing, I heard this from a Bellular video talking about the borrowed power system going away, and what he feels like that is a perk in that regards. Because one of the things that I've like always kind of said, like, well, if it doesn't really matter, it's a challenge, right? Like it's a balance beam that the developer has to make, is that if the investment doesn't feel like it's worth it because they're just going to override it, a la Destiny 2. Like if we're sitting here saying, hey, Brian, it's 2 months before the next Destiny expansion, what should I do? And I say, take 2 months off and start on the day one, because you'll be at the power level that everybody's at now. Like you're not, right. There's no investment game to be made outside of the gun collection, in that regards. So whenever they kind of have that reset, it kind of goes and says, well, I mean, you could, but it's, you're going to kind of get set back. But Bellular's inferring that there is no more, they're going away from these borrowed power systems and more into a kind of a skill tree and an investment style mindset into a character. Is that what you're gathering? Yes or no? And what do you think about it, good or bad?
I mean, it is what they said. My problem with it is that it's kind of like you and I announcing that we're going to have the first annual work to game Glamour Con.
Yeah.
And you log in game and there's going to be prizes and events and it's going to be amazing. But we title it as the first annual. That implies that there's going to be a second annual, which requires trust. You have to trust that we're going to come back and do this again.
Yeah.
Ideally, there's a history of us saying we're going to do things annually and we've done them annually, or we say we're going to do things every Friday and we do them every Friday. And you and I, work to game has never been that consistent about anything. And so even within somebody, like, sometimes we post a lot. There's been times we post 5 times a day. Sometimes we go silent for a bit. Sometimes we've moved to kind of being just a discussion channel. This used to be much broader. We've covered other games on here, but it's mostly 14 now. And so, like, to say we're the first annual GlamourCon, as two guys that have never spent a lot of time talking about Glamour, we haven't earned the ability to say that and really get a big reaction. We're like, wow, nobody showed up. Yeah. And so when they say it's not a borrowed power system, what a borrowed power system means to me, the implication is that you took it from somewhere. So because we're not taking it from somewhere, it's not borrowed, right? But the actual, where the rubber hits the road, is that a borrowed power system is something that you get at the start of one expansion and it goes away at the end of the next expansion. Mm-hmm. And so calling something not a borrowed power system, saying talent trees are something that you invest in and you live with, is not something you can call out in 10.0. It's something you can say, this is our intention. But where I believe you that borrowed power really was something introduced with Legion, maintained through BFA into Shadowlands, and that chapter of WoW, that aspect of WoW is closed, is when we go into 11.0 and it's still talent trees. Because on its own, if they revamp talent trees, and we spend all this time chasing balance, and this is the new meta. And then with 11.0, they bring back a borrowed power system. Then effectively for 10.0, talent trees were the borrowed power system.
Right.
Because you gained all this knowledge, you gained all this perspective, and then it didn't matter 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad people are optimistic about it. It is a reference to things we've had before, and so I'm excited about it. But like, it's still just talk. It's still just words, and like they say, show don't tell. But like, you need to communicate as well. So they're doing what they need to do. They're telling, but I think this is, at this point, so much trust has been lost that this is kind of like when a spouse has really hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
You know, you and I have both been married for a long time. We're talking, you know, I'm coming up on a decade, you're over it. And when my wife or I, when one of us does something and we do it repeatedly that offends the other one, and they ask you nicely to, you know, can you change this behavior? Can you be a little more considerate about how you communicate on this topic? And you just keep missing the mark. And then you push it past a line, and one of you's mad at the other one. You're upset. There's a big sit down, you know, we're going to really talk about this, and moving forward is going to be better. I do need to tell my wife about the change I want to make, but more importantly will come the action. I can't just do the action and be like, well, you didn't see that. No, I need to tell her that's my intent. I need to communicate in whatever way we communicate, but communication on its own doesn't fix it. And so if I say, hey, I told you I was sorry, I corrected the behavior, that doesn't even fix it. So they've done the telling. They're in the middle of doing the showing. They've got patch content that, you know, people seem to be relatively happy with. They've got an expansion coming out that people might be happy with. But even then, even when they show and tell, your wife still may be mad at you for a while. She might just say, I understand, and I'm going to make an effort to be in a good mood on our date this week. And I understand that you've corrected the action. You've said you're sorry, but I'm just going to be mad for a while. So I think what I'm feeling right now is that I'm just mad for a while. Mm-hmm. And at this point, they've got leadership changes that are tied to is Microsoft taking over on the 28th. It will be the shareholder meeting to decide if that moves to the next step. They've had all sorts of direction changes within the WoW teams. I am friends with somebody who's an artist at Blizzard now that took a full-time position. He said, you know, and I have other friends that work at Blizzard, and they've told me that across the board, like, the pay is becoming more competitive, and like, it's not an overnight fix, but like, things are really heading in the right direction there. But I'm still mad. And so like, the actions are being taken, the words are being said, but like, even if this is an expansion that's perfect, I need 10.1 to be good. I need 10.2 to be good. So I'll take my action. I'll probably pre-order it when that becomes available. And I'm reading through all these interviews, and I'm learning a lot. But even then, like, I'm still having to try to get over the pain of everything they've done to this point.
Yeah. So beyond that, let's say they have really kind of fixed a lot of the problems within the internals. They come out, you know, like, I'm kind of, as I look into, you know, the model and the industry more, you know, it seems that MMOs have really shifted to a seasonal model, meaning that Blizzard comes out, they release 10.0, people are excited, they play it, and then eventually they just kind of say, all right, I'll see you in 2 years for 11.0. Sure. And then you end up having essentially kind of like, if you look at it in terms of us in Final Fantasy XIV, where expansion comes out, we play it, we continue to play it, and then another expansion comes out, we play it, we continue to play it, where when we look at the overall community, people play the expansion, they take a break, and they come back for the before the next expansion, get caught up, and then play the expansion. And so there's a pattern that we're seeing develop within MMOs, and that Yoshi P, by his words alone, are saying like, yeah, if you're frustrated or you're not having fun, take a break, go play something else. Right. We'll be ready for you, etc. Do you see that? You know, do you see WoW kind of adopting that kind of model? And what you see with the frustration is that players who want to continue to play like they used to play, where you only played one MMO, that's where the frustration might come from? Or do you think that when you just look at it, it's like, yeah, this is just kind of your every 2 year WoW, you know, cycle?
I was listening to Asmongold talk about this, and on his stream, I guess yesterday, the day before. And one of the issues with their design is right now they are letting as much as they say the game's not a race for world first game, they are letting the elite, they are letting the top end set a lot of the rules when it comes to design changes, when it comes to how much we grind, when it comes to how we acquire power, when it comes to systems like Master Looter and the changes they've made. And he kind of pointed out that you're letting, let's say, 500 people drive the ship with their choices for the rest of the population. Now, every expansion they come out and they say, we're going to be alt friendly, but alts aren't going to be required. We're going to communicate, but we've got some surprises for you. We've got new stuff for professions, but it's going to be cohesive with the last expansions. We've got PvP balances that we think you're really going to enjoy. And it's the same message. And then we have to decide when it actually comes out if any of that was true. So it's hard to gauge at this point without actually playing the live version of the game, what is really in store as far as like how the casual enjoys the game. Let's say this targets next spring. Let's say this comes out March of 23. For me, my plan would be to come back to the game. And when I used to play WoW, I played WoW basically exclusively. Mm-hmm. And then other games just slid in when like the servers were offline way back in the day when they used to have to like take the server down for a whole day, or I've already played a lot this week, and so I've got time. I've done all the stuff I need to do, and I've got time to play another game. And it kind of drove what I spent. Mm-hmm. When I quit in Pandaria, and I took Warlords of Draenor off, when I came back from primarily moving to being a 14 player, I actually played the game a lot differently. I played it much more like a 14 player. And to do that in WoW, that means you have to give up some things. You're not going to be the actual cutting edge of what you can have as far as AP and all these systems, because you're not playing every single day. You're not playing multiple days a week even. Sometimes I take a whole week off of 14 and it's fine. And so if you do WoW that way, you end up playing more casually. And I think there is a quiet majority of the players that are playing that way. And in Twitch chat, they're like, oh, I can't believe that guy's eye level is this. But like, if you go look at how many people are actually clearing Mythic, when you go look at how many people are regularly farming, anything above M12, it really isn't that, it isn't the driving metric when we look at the total player base. So if you think of the casuals, as you and I were talking the other day, and you use the metaphor that players are this swarm of locusts, and they come in and they just devour the crop and then move on. I do think that WoW is aware of that. And I do think that they're going to have to be aware that MMOs can be seasonal. Mm-hmm. So when I look at next March, the question then is, what can they have in the game by then to satisfy the swarm of locusts? And how often can they update it? 14 has long prepared for that. Their crop regrows every 4 months. Right. They have a patch cycle every 4 months. And so the locusts, are much closer to migratory birds, where we know to go away for the winter and come back because the food will be back. I think WoW has got to move to something more predictable. They've got to move to a patch cycle that tells us, I don't know, something like how many patches even come in an expansion, and what does a patch have? How often are patches?
The fact that you had the community speculating on when 9.1 was, for example, that drove a lot of frustration as to people, and especially because they would do that 6-month sub at the beginning to get this mount, and then it's like, wait, there was no content in that 6 months. Oh man, I stopped playing. They got me to buy a store mount with sub time, and that's where I think 14 really kind of does set the bar in terms of and Yoshi P coming out saying, listen, we're gonna push back our cycle a little bit, and gamers, you're you deliver, okay, that makes sense, we get it, the world's changing, it's doing it the way y'all were doing it was pretty breakneck, and we're probably going to end up in the long term of it have better content because of it. And I think that's actually really important. Now, before we go, one of the things that keeps popping up in my mind is as I'm still waiting to get my Steam Deck, I go man, the Steam Deck is going to make me so much more efficient when it comes to playing games online. Being that I can install Windows, and whether 14 supports it or not, I'm not too worried about it. But just the simple fact that hey, I can install these games, I can play these games, and I have that the availability. I wonder how much WoW going forward from a point on in time forward in this regards is setting itself up to being not supporting these other cloud platforms, not supporting consoles, not supporting these things. That do we see a general shift in MMOs that either WoW has to go and do an insane amount of work to kind of play catch up? Do you feel the Steam Deck should be supported from a Blizzard launcher perspective? What are your thoughts?
I think that we are filming this at the end of April, but not the very end of April.
Yeah.
And at the very end of April, there is a shareholder meeting for Blizzard executives and shareholders to decide, are they going to be acquired by Microsoft? Is that number big enough? Is this moving forward? And at each stage, it has a chance to derail. It's an engagement. They're not locked in yet.
Right.
But before they sign across the dotted line and this ownership changes, right, and Activision Blizzard rolls into being Team Microsoft, I think that's going to drive a lot of this. Historically, Blizzard has cited any number of reasons for why they don't want to be on GeForce Now and why they don't want to be, on consoles. But as you see the UI start to absorb things that the add-on community has typically handled, as you see controller support on the back end be made possible, at least through console commands initially, as you see leadership change and you see some leadership and some team members come in who do have experience working in and around consoles, there is a logic to World of Warcraft going to console. When you look at Guildwars, which has like 12 abilities basically, and it's not console supported. And if they go to Steam, that's going to create a kind of console supported. When you look at New World and it's not this native console support, and you look at World of Warcraft, it is just this giant home field advantage to 14 being a traditional MMORPG, and it's competing against these smaller MMOs that are also great games, but it's competing against other MMOs that don't have the amount of content that 14 has. And don't regularly update like 14 does. And so it kind of gives them a chance to be the big fish in a little pond. And I have no idea. You and I talk about this sometimes with YouTube and Twitch. We're on both platforms, and there are times that one platform makes something kind of abrasive. It makes it kind of hard for us to deal with as a creator. But as a creator that operates on multiple platforms, we've tried Facebook, we've tried Mixer, we are regularly on Twitch Monday through Friday-ish, and at least 4 of those days. And then we are on YouTube regularly across, I don't know, what are you up to, 96, 200 channels? And so as we do this, it feels weird when something on Twitch forces us to go post it on YouTube, and YouTube gets their half of the ad revenue. And it feels weird on YouTube when we go to do something like have a project's community supported, and it's like, oh, we'll go hit subscribe on Twitch to support us. If you're looking to support this cause, we're going to have a big drive on this day, and that's where the money's going to go. And then Twitch is taking a piece, and so it feels weird that these platforms don't do that. And like the fact that WoW doesn't support consoles, you're asking, do they? But like, I think that's a leadership question. So, 22 minutes later, answer your question. Let's see on the 28th.
Yeah.
If they're really going toward the
if Microsoft, is able to close on the deal, I do suspect that we'll see Battle.net become the Microsoft game store. Like in that regards, where like, great, you got games, you got these tools. Let's just
way better.
Oh yeah.
Way better.
I was looking in the Xbox like app, etc., and it's like, all right.
Think of all the trouble Blizzard has had with their image over the last year, and realize that in the last week or two, Diablo 2 crossed 5 million units. How does it do that? Because when you want to play Diablo 2, you don't have to go Google how to do it and get a whole bunch of feedback on all the reasons you should not support this company that are lingering from issues over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
The reason is because when you realize you want to buy it, you just click buy and it's over. I don't have any time to think about the decision. I don't have any time, and like, get out of your own way. I am so frustrated with Microsoft when I have to sit here and try to talk myself out of, can I live without this game? I mean, they're not Nintendo. I have to like actively be like, do I have a day off work I can go about buying this game? Like, Nintendo just plugging things in digitally. What are you doing?
Oh, Nintendo. They'll get there. They're gonna get
I'm
there
trying
someday.
to pay you. I don't have 5 hours and the money.
I got one or the other. Well, guys, let us know what you think, especially as it relates to Dragonflight, or is it something where you're curious, you'll check it back out? Is this essentially kind of a new chapter in the age of Blizzard? Any and all thoughts, welcome. Chris, why don't you take us out?
Guys, I assume we're not done talking about this. It's nice to talk about something Blizzard where I'm not just visibly angry. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed this. We've got a lot of content coming your way as we prepare for Ultimate here in a couple days. Brian and I won't be doing it, but we'll be watching on 6.15 is right around the corner. So great time to be a 14 fan. We're, of course, I think 14's healthier if the other MMOs in the space are doing well too. So best of luck to whatever Dragonflight becomes.
All right, guys. See you next time. Take care.